Hey everybody, I'm Al Ganoza for the PCTV network and welcome to Women's Financial Workshop. And I'm joined by Richard Hand with Valley Forge Wealth Management. Richard,
hey,
how you doing?
Doing well, yourself.
Just a quick explanation, you're a CFP, CLU, CHFC certified financial planner, but explain to us what you do.
Well, Al, basically my firm helps people manage their financial affairs so they can achieve their goals. So whether it's investment management, risk management, tax management, all the above, we're sort of like the financial quarterback for individuals, families, and small businesses.
Okay, now we were reading some of this article. You wrote an article, The 10 Things I Wish I Had Known Before Becoming a Widow.
That's right.
That's a lot of things to know, and some things that probably people don't take into account. What made you decide to write it?
Well, I've been doing this for 23 years, and I have a good number of clients who are widows, a couple of widowers as well, and I really didn't feel I knew them as well as I should, and I always felt like they were holding back a little bit when we spoke about different topics. And what I did is I put together a focus group of widows who are not clients of mine, and we went through 10 different important areas of financial planning, and came up with some interesting answers.
Okay, now we have some questions here, maybe to help somebody out there, hopefully. First one: how should a couple handle the matter of important documents?
Well, that's a good question. Oftentimes, when one spouse passes on, the other has absolutely no idea what to do, who to call. It's very traumatic. In addition to losing their best friend of 50 years, they have no idea what to do. Very scary place to be. It's important for each spouse to talk to each other about where the important documents are going to be kept, perhaps with an attorney, a financial advisor, in a safe deposit box somewhere. That's an important aspect. A central location for everything is nice. My firm and other financial firms offer electronic document storage, which you can access via a website from anywhere in the world, which is a nice thing to have.
Okay, now this next question, I know this is the case because I know this was the case with my mom and dad. My dad died. My mom had to take care of the finances. What if only one spouse is the keeper of family finances?
Yeah, and that's usually true in older generations, how one spouse really did all the work as far as finances goes. And if that spouse dies first, it is really difficult for the one who has no idea what's going on to kind of manage even basic things like paying the electric bill and things like that. I actually had a client in Collegeville some years ago. He never wrote a check his entire adult life. His wife of 55 years passed away. She did all the finances. Wow. This guy couldn't write a check. I had to teach him how to write checks to pay for things. That's how interesting it can be. So if one spouse is in charge of the finances, it's very important for that one to teach the other how to do it. Or there are companies out there, bookkeepers, that will actually take care of paying all your bills for you for a fee each month, which is not a bad option either.
Yeah, and sometimes it's easy to forget that you have the bills.
It's very easy to forget.
Okay. What about life insurance? Does it come into play and is it helpful?
Well, it depends on the age of the person who passed on. If somebody's in their 80s, oftentimes the big term policy they bought when they were 50 is no longer in force, which is unfortunate. Permanent life insurance, conversely, is around as long as you're around. Traditional whole life things like that. People who do have that find it a lot easier to pay for unexpected costs, like large medical bills that are unreimbursed, or large funeral expenses, things like that. Also, probably the most important use for life insurance down the road is replacing income that's lost from Social Security or pension as a result of one of the spouses passing away. So it's a very useful tool, it's very tax friendly, and there's no stock market risk associated with it.
Okay. What happens to Social Security or pension income when someone dies, and what should you do to maximize these cash flows? Okay.
Yeah, this is often a very bitter pill to swallow for folks. So, for example, husband and wife, they're both receiving Social Security. Husband gets $2,000 a month, and the wife gets $1,000 a month. If he passes away first, the surviving spouse can choose to keep her check or keep his check. The higher of the two, it's their choice. Obviously, they'll keep the one for $2,000. The net effect, though, is they're still losing $1,000 a month of cash flow. That's $12,000 a year. For a woman who's maybe 65 and is going to live another 25 years, that's a lot of money that she's out. So again, life insurance, if we happen to have that around, we can invest that and replace that cash flow. Otherwise, we have to use other investments to replace the cash flow. If there's no other investments to use, it's just cash flow that's gone, and we have to adjust living standards.
Okay. What if the spouse who passed away had a pension plan that they were receiving and What if they were vested but did not begin receiving income yet?
Okay. Well, like with Social Security, pension plans will most likely change when the spouse who was covered passes away. Many times the spouse who is surviving will receive an equal amount to what their spouse was receiving. Sometimes it'll be a percentage of that, like half or 75%. Sometimes it's zero. Depends on the pension plan itself, what option they chose when they retired. If allowable, if the person hasn't retired yet, say they were 60 and they haven't retired, there may be an eligibility for a lump sum distribution from that pension plan to the spouse, which she can roll into an IRA for herself. Now she controls those assets and can pass them on herself someday to her children or grandchildren, which is a nice option. If a lump sum option isn't available, oftentimes the spouse will be able to get a monthly income based on her age and what the spouse's earnings were, and then she would just simply get a check for as long as she's alive, then the money would stop.
Okay. How would you advise the widow to handle health insurance?
Health insurance is tough, depending on the age again. So if a spouse is young and her husband passes away, for example, let's say 45, and she's working, she would just have health insurance, hopefully, through her employer, though that's changing these days. Sometimes the employer of a deceased spouse will actually offer the surviving spouse and children health insurance beyond the COBRA period. COBRA basically lasts for maybe two to 2.5 years, which is expensive, and many times the employer will actually pay that premium for them as sort of a being nice type thing. If the spouse was older and was on Medicare, then the surviving spouse, if they're old enough for Medicare, they can simply continue that. If they're between, say, 60 and 65, they have to get their own insurance, which sometimes can be challenging. Depending on what happens with Obamacare in January, you know, maybe it'll be easier, maybe it won't be. Not really sure yet. That's a changing dynamic.
Okay, still a lot up in the air. So
a lot up in the air, yeah, but it's a very important insurance to not, disregard.
Okay. What should a surviving spouse do when there are IRA or 401k accounts in play?
Yeah, well, this is oftentimes the largest asset that retired folks have. And if they have a small house, modest home, maybe it's worth $300,000, but they might have $1 million or $2 million in their 401k or IRA account. So that's a substantial asset. The focus group, the major consensus was to not try to do this yourself. Large amounts of money like that should really be handled by professionals, because not just because of the investment component part, which entails risk and things like that, but more so the tax planning aspect. So if you check the wrong box on the beneficiary form as a widow and you send that thing back and you cause a taxable event, you don't get a do-over. Tax shelter accounts are like an egg. Once you crack that egg, game over. And I've seen over the years so many people make the wrong choices, and they just don't know what the options are. They don't know what to do. Thus, having professional help is really, really critical.
Well, could they end up losing money then?
Yeah, they could end
to
up
the government?
Yeah, they could take a tax-sheltered account, which they could, theoretically stretch over their lifetime, pass down to their heirs, and stretch that over their lifetime, all tax deferred. But instead of that happening, they cause a large taxable distribution up front. So on $1 million, you might lose $350,000 right off the bat.
Right to the government.
Yeah, and you can't get that back. You can't do a do-over. 99% of the time, you can't do a do-over. So it's important to get some help and do it right the first time.
Okay. What is suggested regarding other types of investments?
Well, again, the consensus of the focus group was to have professionals help with these assets, especially if there's multiple accounts. So I can think of one client in the past, he had about 25 different accounts all over the place. He was trying to diversify himself by having accounts in different places. Unfortunately, the things that he was buying in those different accounts were very similar. So even though he had all these different accounts, he pretty much had the same stuff over and over and over again. So, and that's just because he didn't know what he was doing. It's often advisable just to consolidate things, and it makes it a lot easier to figure out where you are. And again, the components within those accounts, the investments inside, should be well diversified. That's important. So again, you almost have to have professional help to get real diversity versus the perceived kind.
Okay. How should a recent widow find the proper attorney to help her? A lot of them out there.
There are a lot of attorneys out there, and that could lead into a few jokes, but we won't do that right now. Attorneys are like doctors out. There's lots of different specialties. And finding the right one for this type of work is important. So many times people will have a family attorney they've worked with for years, and they're comfortable with him or her. If they don't, many times their financial advisor or their accountant can refer them to an attorney. Most of us have working relationships with attorneys and so forth and so on. If that's not a possibility, usually the County Bar Association, no matter where you live in the country, will have a website, and you can run through the different specialties, estate planning and things like that. That works out pretty well. But make sure your attorney you're hiring to do your estate work is an estate attorney. Usually they'll have an LLM designation after their name, which just means they went to an extra year or two of school to learn about taxes, which is fun.
Now, somebody out there might be thinking, do I need an attorney? I have you to help me out, and do I have to have an attorney?
Well, technically speaking, you don't have to have an attorney if you happen to know how to do all this stuff yourself.
Okay.
And since most of us don't know how to do it, it's much easier just to pay a little freight to the attorney to have it done right the first time.
Okay.
Again, sometimes trying to save $1 can cost you $1,000, and it doesn't make any sense to do that. It's a lot easier to work. With my clients, I'm sort of the quarterback, and we refer out to accountants and attorneys and other folks to help, facilitate people getting to their goals. That's what we do, is we're sort of like financial quarterbacks. But it's money well spent.
Okay. Are living trusts? I've heard of living trusts. Are they a good idea?
Yeah, living trusts depends on the goal of the client. I mean, again, I've seen a lot over my career, and oftentimes we meet people with these living trusts, which are a 3-ring binder with gold encrusted jewels and things like that look very important. And some attorney or somebody charged them maybe $4,000 or $5,000 to put this together. The problem is, oftentimes no assets were ever transferred into the trust. So when that person dies, the trust is empty, and all their stuff still goes through probate, which is not what they wanted in the first place. So you have to be careful with these things. Again, the details, that's where the devil resides. And that's the things that we pay attention to. Living trust, if done correctly, can have assets avoid the probate process. And again, probate's not bad, but it lacks privacy. So if a lot of your assets were comprised of dirty magazine collection, for example, and you don't want your friends at church to know about it, if it goes through probate, they're going to know. If it goes through a trust, they won't know.
Now, why is that? Probate's a part of public record then?
Yeah, probate is public record. Okay. Exactly. Also, too, living trusts help with distribution and control of assets to minors, or if you have kids in a marriage that isn't very solid and you're worried about your family assets going to the soon-to-be ex-wife or ex-husband, living trust can help with that. If your kid has a drug issue or alcohol issue, a spendthrift issue, there's a lot of nice things that trust can do to control distribution of assets when you're gone.
Should people make long-term care insurance part of their plan?
Okay. Long-term care insurance really can be a game changer for many people. The odds of needing long-term care in this country are 1 out of 2. So every married couple out there, one of them is going to need some sort of long-term care insurance down the road. Whether it's in their 60s, 70s, maybe their 80s, or even 90s, it's very expensive. Okay? For people who are planning on leaving their estate to their children, their grandchildren, their church, whatever they're into, charity, and they want that to happen, oftentimes later in life health events will prevent those assets from going there, and instead that money will have to be spent on care, which in this part of the country is about $80,000 a year. So even if you have $1 million portfolio, which most people don't, you can burn through one of those in about 10, 12 years, and that money's gone. So long-term care insurance is something that I own personally, even though I'm only 45. It's something that you want to have it and not need it.
Yeah.
Just like your homeowner's insurance. You pay State Farm to worry about your house burning down, right? But you don't want your house to burn down just to use the insurance. This is the same kind of thing. You're better off, writing checks and never using it. And that's the lucky people. Lucky people write checks for things they'll never use.
We had talked about probate. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, or we think we're all covered on that?
Well, probate, again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It does ensure that your will is read. It ensures that your creditors are paid if you have any debts out there that are due anybody. All those legal matters are kind of tied up. And again, it's good to have an attorney help you with this. There's several different steps that have to be taken. There has to be an estate return filed, inheritance tax return filed. A lot of different things that have to be done for the estate to be properly handled. And again, it's good to have professional help with that. Probate does lack privacy, but depending what your assets are, maybe that's not a big deal. There is a little bit of cost for probate. Again, it's not overwhelming. If you have a larger estate, it might be a good idea to use a trust. Smaller estates, probate's really okay.
Okay, just a reminder, I'm talking with Richard Hand of Valley Forge Wealth Management. This is Women's Financial Workshop. And does it seem like women are the surviving spouses more often than not?
Yeah, Al, that's basically how the cards were dealt. So usually, I'll just say most of my clients have wives who are a few years younger than them. My wife is 7 years younger than me, for example. Odds are, it's not guaranteed, but odds are I'll pass away first. Okay, and doing what I do, I pretty much take care of the family finances. My wife and I have had this discussion. She said, frankly, who do I call if something happens to you? Told her what to do. You have to know what to do. What's the nice idea is to actually leave a written letter behind for people, especially when you're going generationally. So after husband dies, now it's wife, she should write a little letter to whoever her heirs are going to be. Okay, I passed away. Here's your checklist. Call the attorney, call the financial advisor, call the accountant. Here's all the people you have to call to get things accomplished. That way they're not in shock, like what do we do? Who do we call? Because if you don't know what to do, you might do the wrong thing. And that can be very expensive, a very expensive lesson to learn.
Is it advisable, do you get people doing it for a wife whose husband has maybe a terminal illness, I hate to say that, or is in hospice care? Is it advisable for them to maybe talk to you before something happens? Or
yeah, a lot of these things that we talk about can be done prior to becoming a widow, and really should be. Life insurance, for example, kind of have to get that while you're still around.
Right.
One of those things. A lot of planning can be done prior to passing on, and if done correctly, when that person passes on, it'll still hurt because you just lost your best friend, but you won't be, scared to death because of unknowns in the financial aspect of things. It's very scary. I'll share with you myself. I got into the business sort of by accident. My mom and dad passed away a few months apart from each other when I was 23, and I didn't get to go to Drexel to be an architect. It didn't happen for me. I got into this, and it was very difficult for us, my brother and sister and I, to handle because, number one, we were very, very sad, but number two, financial stuff, mess, big disaster. I didn't, at that time, know what to do. So in addition to trying to grieve, I was scared to death because I had no idea where we're going to do financially and things like that. It's very challenging. So it makes me actually feel kind of good to help people with that because I know they won't go through what I went through at that time.
Yeah. What are some other things in the article that you get into that maybe we haven't touched upon yet?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest things for the ladies I spoke to was keeping active socially. The ladies I met with all lived in a large retirement community in Chester County, and they sold their big house that they had with their husband, raised their kids there, and many of them, that was very traumatic, leaving the home they've had for 40 or 50 years that they share with their husband. But living in a smaller community with other people in a similar stage of life, they found a lot of new friends. They got out a lot more. Went out to eat more often, went out to movies, and did more social things. And that was actually very therapeutic for them. They actually call it free therapy that they got from meeting new friends and things like that. Being housebound after somebody passes away, you can almost get into a depression type situation and maybe put on weight and not take care of yourself, and that leads to health problems itself. Leaving the big house, moving to the retirement community was, all of them agree, the best move they made.
Here in working the news, I hear about a lot of scams involving elderly people. Do they tend to be distrusting? Like, do you have a hard time sometimes, or sometimes maybe they're too trusting, and that's what makes them vulnerable? Yeah,
well, they are. Most people of the older generations were raised a little differently than kids today. They're courteous. They'll take a phone call. They're generally nice, and usually they're pretty trusting. So when you are working with a financial professional, okay, make sure they have credentials to actually be doing what they're doing. So, for example, a certified financial planner like myself or Susie Orman, that designation, CFP, we not only have to know all this stuff, but we're also held to the highest ethical standards out there. Mm-hmm. That's really critical. Just because something's legal doesn't mean it's ethical. And there are lots of people out there who will do things that are legal but not really in the best interest of the client. So that's important. Accountants are also great resources. You know, CPAs, for example, are great with the tax aspect of things. You know, how much is it going to cost to do this or do that? They can figure that out. Some of them can be helpful on the investment side, most not so much, but that's kind of where we come in, is the risk management part.
If a woman, she says, "Oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford somebody like a CFA or a CPA, CFP,"
Right.
what would you say to her along those lines?
Well, you know what? You get what you pay for in life. And just like your doctor, who obviously isn't free, and the plumber who just came out and put a new dishwasher in, he wasn't free. Well, we have to pay our bills as well. It's money well spent. Again, the amount of knowledge necessary to execute all these different things correctly isn't something you can get from reading a book or an article. I even teach a class in Chester County Night School to folks. I've done it for about 8 years. And after taking this class, most people are like, I still have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's it. So it's always wise to hire somebody. We're worth it.
Could you say this country is financial illiterate?
Yeah, our country sadly is somewhat financially illiterate. If you think about home economics class back in middle school or high school, we baked cupcakes and made book bags. There was no economic anything. There was none of this discussed at all. Most kids today learn from their parents, and their parents, 3/4 of the time, are screwed up financially. They don't know what they're doing. So the kids are learning bad habits from their parents, which kind of adds to the problem. So financial literacy is a problem in this country, and there are programs that we actually offer for free. We offer our time for free to groups, school districts, things like that, to help kids understand the basics of money, checking, savings, paying your bills, your income statement, your balance sheet, where you're at, basic investing stuff, nothing too exotic. But yeah, it's important if you don't know this stuff to hire somebody who does.
So, and generally, when should a widow get in touch with you? I mean, and she's got a lot going on through her mind. She's trying to take care of a lot of issues. What priority should be on this, and when should she call, and how should she get in contact with you?
Right. Well, I mean, to find a certified financial planner, whether it's me or one of my brethren out there, you can go to cfp.net and just do a search by zip code, and it'll give you all the CFPs nearby. I would suggest calling one as soon as possible, because many times the assets that pass by contract, meaning a beneficiary provision like on an IRA or a life insurance policy or a 401k, that doesn't go through your probate estate. That stuff can come in a couple weeks. Okay. However, if you fill out that beneficiary selection form with 18 different boxes, if you check the wrong box, you might cause a large taxable event by accident, and you can't fix it.
Yep.
Don't fill out that form by yourself. Have somebody help you with it who knows what they're looking at.
Is there a tendency for them to push off the financial aspect of it and keep procrastinating, or not?
Yeah, I think I can't think of any other subject that's more procrastinated.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, except exercise maybe.
Yeah.
People don't like to get into this stuff because it's something they don't understand. And I'll tell you this, women are much more open and realistic about finances than the guys are. Guys often look at me as a threat because I'm coming into their home, or they're coming in my office, whatever, and I know all this stuff and they don't. And now their wife is looking at me like I'm Mr. Genius, and husband's not so much. And
so you sense resentment a little bit.
They have a little bit of resentment towards me, and they really shouldn't. I don't know if they feel the same way about their doctor, who knows how to diagnose things. I pretty much diagnose problems in their financial matters as a doctor would diagnose things in their physical matters. No different.
Okay. So once again, this is Richard Hand, Valley Forge Wealth Management, Women's Financial Workshop. We got a couple minutes left. Want to tie things up? Want to send some financial or final reminders out there, things to keep in mind?
Yeah. Once again, make sure you have your ducks in a row before something happens. It's even if you don't have a will in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania works like this, and states vary depending on the type of law they're set up. We have English law in Pennsylvania. A lot of Western states use Spanish law, so they're community property states, and it's different in how it works when somebody dies without a will. So Pennsylvania, for example, the spouse would get half of her husband's estate. The kids would split the other half. Well, if she needs the whole thing, she'd have to get the other half back from the kids. Maybe the kids are okay giving her the money, and maybe they're not. Depends on your kids. in their situation. So having a will is really important if you're 25, 85, 65, it doesn't matter. Make sure you have one put together. Don't get one on the internet because it's not going to be what you need, just like everything else on the internet. Have an attorney. It might be $300-400 to execute a will, power of attorney, living will. It's not a lot of money. It really isn't. And any financial advisor like myself would have a couple of attorneys that he refers to that he's comfortable with, and it'll get done correctly the first time.
Well, I think I can cut corners sometimes trying to save a buck, but I like what you said. You could end up saving a buck, but end up losing $500, and if you don't go to somebody like yourself or an attorney.
Sure. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the same goes true with investing. And you can go on E-Trade and you can buy the same things I buy from my clients' accounts, whenever you want to. But do you know what you're buying? Do you know why you're buying it? Do you know why you should buy it at that price, and when should you sell it? People tend to buy things, watch them go up, and it's like, isn't that great? They never sell, and then they come back down again. They made no money. Nothing happened. They had an opportunity, but didn't execute, and nothing happened. So people, unless you do it for a living, you really shouldn't manage the big chunk of your money. You should have a professional do it. I encourage people to play around with 10, 20 grand and mess around, I call it, with E-Trade, which is fine. But for the lion's share of your money, the stuff you don't want to actually lose, have somebody help you with it.
Okay. And real quick, last time, tell people what they should do to get in touch with you and what you will do first with them.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's www.valleyforgewealth.com or 888-650-1776 is our number. You can simply get in touch with us, and when I meet with clients, I don't charge anything to meet with somebody. So when we sit at a little table at my office just like this, we'll have a conversation. If there's some things that I can help you with, we can kind of go from there. If you're all buttoned up, well, you're all buttoned up, and that's a good thing. I've met very few people who are buttoned up in my 23-year career. So rhand@valleyforgewealth.com is my email, and we're right above Phoenixville. And an old one-room schoolhouse is our office, which is pretty cool. So if you like architecture and finance, it's a nice combination.
Okay. Richard, thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I hope you folks did out there too.
Thanks, Al.
All right. This has been Al Ganosa for the PCTV Network and Women's Financial Workshop. Thanks for watching.